All right, we're live.
We are.
We're live. I'm trying out a platform called StreamYard for the first time with my good friend and fellow coach, Lamarr, Coach L. And, I called this a safe space for dangerous conversations because we want to talk about maybe an uncomfortable topic. And I thought Lamarr has a wealth of wisdom and life experience, and that's why I kind of wanted to bring him on to have this conversation. And it's a little bit of a departure from our usual sort of fitness and health, but I think it's a valuable conversation to have. So, Lamarr, it's awesome to have this chat with you, man.
Thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be a part of this and um, just really include the whole spectrum of life as opposed to just, one spectrum. Fitness is really about fitness of the mind as well, fitness of the heart, fitness of our thoughts, our space, our beliefs. And this is important because the same way we would talk about what we're eating in terms of nutrition and how that impacts our body, what we consume mentally is just as important, and how it impacts our body and our lives as well.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer of what I like to call and start to incorporate into my programs, the mental obesity. There are a lot of things
Yes.
that we have in our brains that weigh us down to the point where we may not even be conscious of it because it's so normal.
Yeah.
So, somebody consumes a certain food and they feel a certain way, it becomes so normal because they felt that way for so long, they don't even realize it. So that's what this is for me. So it's really kind of opening up the mental obesity and like dissecting my mental diet.
I love that. I love that term, mental obesity. And you highlighted that we normalize it. Um, I interviewed someone the other day for Wellness Unplugged, and she said everything is food,
Mm,
and I was like, wow.
yeah,
Okay, and she explained it in more detail, but essentially everything, not just what we put into our mouth, but what we put into our brain is
right,
also food.
right.
And then we ask, what is it feeding? And I wonder, like, if we're this whole mental obesity thing, man, that's kind of it's quite a picture, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I want to give a little bit of backstory though, as well. So, because you're 47, you don't look 47.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you, man. If I let it grow, if I
yeah,
have better lighting, if I let it grow, you'll see my children's stress marks, aka
yeah.
grays.
I just shaved my beard off, and I shaved off some of the gray that's
Yeah.
coming in as well. But you're one of the fittest 47-year-olds I know. When's your are you getting close to 48?
Where are we? We're almost in, what is it, September? Wow.
Yeah, it's
I'm
nearly
about
October.
halfway to 48.
Well, I'm only a couple months off 40, so I'm just I'm taking inspiration from you that 40s don't have to be this daunting downhill trend.
Oh
Um,
man, it doesn't. And the
yeah,
weird thing is, man, because I've heard, and not to go too far off of this, but because I've heard, and I guess it connects because it goes to the mental obesity, but because for years I've either consumed what I thought 40 would be or even 30 would be, which was like dinosaur.
yeah,
And then like 40 was like, oh my gosh, you're a fossil, it's over. I still find myself in those small little mental battles, like, man, like I do a lot of my workouts in the park, and I'm out there jumping, burpees, band workouts, and everything. And there's this thing that tries to get in here and says, "What are you doing? You're 47." And it literally, I mean, it literally almost tries to convert where I am in terms of my own mental space to
right.
really battle with, like, are you supposed to be doing this? Or you're 47, you're not supposed to be doing this. Or a lot of people that I know, they have this thing, well, you know how it is. Like when they hit 40, it's
Right.
like, oh, I'm 40, you know
Uh,
how it is. I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, I love that. No, I don't. And if you are watching live, by the way, we're streaming on a couple of different platforms. You can leave comments, and the cool thing is we can actually, I'll figure out how to do this, but we can actually post your comments on the live stream, which would be kind of cool. So if something that we share resonates with you, I'd love to see some comments come on here, because this is kind of a new thing. My hope is to have conversations like this that are a more broad spectrum. So if we go back 20 odd years ago. You spent some time in the Air Force.
Yes.
Uh, you've
Yeah.
had some experiences.
Yeah. I mean, Air Force was exciting. How I got there was, man, this lighting.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to dim mine a little bit so like get the glow off of my forehead.
and I need I need a little bit of glow. So we're like literally the piano keys. We have ebony and ivory, and we can take it to the old school Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney song, man.
There we go. Yeah, yeah. Oh man.
Oh man, but yeah. So Air Force, man. Like I actually was dead set against military. I didn't know where I wanted to be at that point in life. I spent about maybe a year and a half after high school, working at Kennedy Airport in New York, and that was an experience. And everybody when I tell people that, they associate, oh, you worked at the airport. No wonder you went to the Air Force. Like nothing to do with each other.
Yeah, yeah.
I worked at the airport. I worked with a lot of cargo and a lot of high sensitive items and things of that nature. And people were stealing them from the cargo section of the planes. I'm like, look, I'm out of here. You guys are crazy. I'm grateful. I thank God that I had that the integrity has been there, because they were, here, you want this? You're not taking me down. And I just had the idea that, man, if I plant the seed today, my tree is going to grow in my backyard, and it's probably going to be full of people with bracelets coming to take me away in a car because somebody found out I'm the one who stole it. And so, there was just a lot of craziness, and eventually they got caught. But little side note there, but I did the airport, and then just like, it was a question like, man, where's life going? Like, what am I doing? And both of my parents, Army veterans, and had some Navy in my family, had some Marines in my family. So everybody talked about how difficult the Air Force is.
It's funny because we call the Air Force when I was in the Navy. But maybe the Canadian Air Force is a little different,
Yeah. I mean, Air Force in the U.S. is there's a lot of book work, a lot of technical work, in addition to the traditional basic training that went on also. There's the assumption that basic training in the Air Force is just pretty much, sitting down, having lunch, and going for nice walks in the daytime. And I don't know what it is now, but I know when I went through, which was back in like 92-ish, 93, did some work. They did some work.
And you did some overseas, at least one overseas tour, is that right? Yeah.
So I mean, I ended up in a few different places within that same environment. But I went to Saudi Arabia. Had a temporary deployment over there, and that's the year in '96 when the barracks were bombed over there, and like 14 people from our unit died in that bombing. No, correction. We had 14 impacted. I think 6 died, and the rest were injuries, like 8 injuries.
And you somehow managed to avoid that.
Man, so it was just a matter of forgetting a gym bag on the flight line. And,
so you went back to the plane, basically?
Complaining about it, like, oh my God, it's 122 degrees. And going back to the flight line, and then so it was 4 of us. 2 went, 2 came back, and one said, I'll go with you, just so you don't have to walk right there by yourself. And I'm like, oh, how sweet.
Yeah.
But I was still mad. I was just like, and I highlight this for a reason, but I was so mad that I had to walk back there because it was hot. Like, if you ever been to any desert or Saudi Arabian heat is hot. So go back to bend down to pick up my bag, and all of a sudden shaking. And we think, sometimes planes come in and they have this backfiring, C-130s. And we were like, it's not a backfire. And we look up, and the barracks, all you see is smoke. And the 2 that we were supposed to meet over there didn't make it out. So then it comes to, I highlight complaining, because I'm complaining, but within forgetting that there was greater purpose. And had I not forgot, what would have been the outcome, this conversation potentially wouldn't even be happening today.
Right. A forgotten gym bag meant that you didn't go into a building that got bombed.
Yeah.
So you like legit narrowly escaped like getting bombed, like minutes, not like, it happened in a distant. No, it was like minutes and maybe a couple 100 meters away, if that.
Right. So like a matter of literally like 5 minutes.
Yeah. So then after the Air Force, you go back to New York, and you decide to become a paramedic.
Yes, I want to put back on another uniform. So I leave one to put on another. And that was an exciting experience, man. I mean, I've had so many situations. I think about even like while I was in, there was a time where I was driving, and my ex-wife now, she was pregnant with my son, and we're driving to see my parents, which was roughly an 8-hour trip. And at some point I fell asleep. Like not even like dozed off. At some point I was sleeping. And she woke up and she slapped me in the chest. And I looked, and we're literally like on the highway. The ditch kind of goes down to the angle. We're in the ditch, still going straight. I glanced at the speedometer, and of course, the U.S. still uses miles per hour. So I was doing about 65, 67 miles per hour.
That's a little over 100 kilometers an hour in a ditch.
Yeah. And so I'm looking ahead, and there's an overpass coming. Corner of my eye, I see a blue pickup truck. And my guess is maybe he was trying to blow his horn. Maybe he's just waiting to see what happened. I don't know. But I just remember seeing the blue pickup truck. And I'm thinking, if I stop, just because of the angle, if I hit the brakes, we're going to flip. So now I'm just like, okay, what are we going to do? So now I'm just grace of God, man. Just maneuver the car back onto the road. Car did a 360 and ended up in the same direction. Of course, pulled over.
Yeah,
and I feel
you're
like
a little awake now. You're awake now.
I think that's why I got into fitness, man, because my heart rate got up. Man, my heart rate was up. I'm like, you okay? He's like, yeah. She's like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Oh, man. So that was like the most intense cardio that I've ever had without cardio.
Yeah.
But I remember at that point stayed awake, and there was no way I was falling asleep after that. But then I think about it, man. My son wouldn't have been here. My son's life could have been taken out.
Yeah.
And before he was even born, because had she not waken me up at that point, that overpass was coming, and we would have went head on. And at that point, there were no airbags.
Right.
So my life could have drastically been changed, and my son totally would not have been here. So
20 years ago, paramedic in New York City.
So
something happened 20 years ago.
Yeah. So, I decided to, put on uniform again, and medical is a place that I didn't want to be. Like, family was medical, mother was medical, grandmother's medical, uncle, somebody was medical. So I'm like, how I got to medical, no idea. Yeah. But I think what really got me attached to the idea was the fact that I didn't have to be stuck in one place. The idea of being in an office all day or just going to a building and just kind of like being there didn't set well with me. So I'm in a space where I can move around and like, yeah, okay, this is great. And then really develop, which I think was already there, but develop a passion for people, develop a passion for helping people. And I think that time, as an EMT and then ultimately a medic, that time allowed me to really develop the passion for helping people. And then, so it would have been over 20 years when I started, but 20 years ago, a little bit over 20 years to the day now, September 11th happens. I remember the morning vividly. Like, I remember the drink my partner had. I remember the call we got going to a precinct for a not an overdose, for a withdrawal. So, a lot of times people get arrested, they claim they're in withdrawal so they can get out of the cell, go to the hospital and get the nice little comfortable bed. And the guy totally wasn't in withdrawal. And I mean, he smoked he smoked weed for the first time, and all of a sudden he was in withdrawals.
Yeah.
So so I remember the events of the morning. I remember the guy's face. All of that is just so clear to me. I remember finding a bag of weed on the floor outside the precinct, and I got ready to reach for it, and then one of the cops came and stepped on it. And, and I hope they're retired. I won't say the precinct, but yeah, he was just like, "That's paperwork. It's time to get off." So he was just going to dispose of it. You know, it's what it is.
Yeah.
Apparently, somebody came in, dropped it or whatever. But all of that just to say, I remember the events of the day vividly. I remember the sky. Why I remember the sky, I don't know. I don't remember what about the sky, but just it was eerily calm to be New York City. Rush hour traffic wasn't even rush hour traffic like normal. And then in the midst of that call, I remember some of the police who just got off, running back in, and I'm like, "Didn't you just leave? You love this place, don't you?" It was like, "You didn't hear?" I'm like, "No." They said a plane just hit the World Trade Center. So the initial thought is, how do you miss the building? Like,
yeah.
And I think around that time previously, in another state, there was like a small plane that hit a building, like a high-rise building. So that was my initial thought. So, when I hear it, I'm visualizing small plane, maybe a twin engine, nothing big, lost control and went into the building. So we got canceled off of that job, and they deployed us over to Canal Street where the towers were, and then you see like a plane hit the building, and it wasn't just a little plane crashed into the building. Oops, we were off course. This was a plane hit the building, and just the energy, the impact, everything that was going on in the environment was just, people standing, eyes wide open, just the shock of what's going on. And then as you hear the engine of a second plane just kind of revving up, and as if the plane was picking up speed intentionally as it got closer to the building to create a greater impact, second plane hit. And at that point, military mind goes into play. Now I'm just like, okay, this is serious. So as we're deployed to the scene, well, we get there. The duty captain, lieutenant or captain, I don't even remember at this point, but he had us. There was units setting up triage, which when you got injured people, you set up a triage station, and then you have like non-critical patients. So the hospitals in the area, they wanted to keep open and available for all the potentially critical patients. So everybody non-critical left New York, left the borough, left the city, and went into one of the outer hospitals, so they can make sure that the load was kept in Manhattan. So as I get there, so lieutenant says, "Hey, go with this unit. They have 5 non-critical. Take them out of the borough into Brooklyn, and you come back. I need you handle that." And then I asked. That's when I asked, like, "Well, what about my partner?" So, "All right, she's going to set up triage with over there. When you come back, she'll be ready with the next group of non-critical, and you guys will head back into the borough," which basically means out of that area into Brooklyn. So as that's happening, we're heading, paperwork and everything is ready. We're heading over the bridge. Then as we're at the end of the Brooklyn Bridge, first tower collapses. And so, there was like breaks and then everybody going. Then ultimately the bridges became clear because I think we were like the last group of vehicles that were allowed over the bridge from that area, because they close off the area and the bridges are close to where the towers were. So, at that point, people are running across the bridge because they have a walkway, and people are starting to speed up across the bridge. And
no kidding.
Yeah, so we get into there, we handle all the paperwork, and now we're getting ready to head back out. We get a message to stand by, wait for a chaplain. I mean, wait for a captain, and the captain comes in with a chaplain, and advises like, well, I don't want you guys going back out on the street. Um, and he advises that your partner may have passed away at the tower, and not from any of the debris, but from the dust and the smoke from everything. So military mind, like, well, they're holding jobs in Brooklyn, so let us do jobs because people are still calling 911. And they're just adamant. It's like, no, we don't want you going back out. We don't want you going back out. So now I'm fussing and I'm like, look, people still need help. So that's where that military mindset kicks in. And you're just like, okay, look, let us do that. So ultimately, they didn't allow us to go back out. It wasn't long, but they found her pretty shortly after and confirmed that she had passed away
Yeah.
from the dust and the smoke from pretty much inhalation, just lung stopped and heart stopped.
Wow. So you've gone one direction and others have gone another direction, and that's why you're still here today. Like, and that seems like such a tiny nutshell to try and put it into, but it's like,
Yeah.
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 Like that's a pretty incredible backstory. And I say that because you've because we're going to shift gears with the conversation a little bit here. You've done a lot. You've served. You've worked to help a lot of people. And I'd like to think that you're still here for a reason, man. If you go through experiences like that,
Yeah.
and somehow you're still here, you've managed to escape death at least 3 times. There's got to be a reason you're still here, man. But we were chatting with a mutual friend the other day, Leon.
Yeah.
And
it was phenomenal also.
Yeah. He made a comment, and he said that every Black American over the age of 25 has experienced like serious personal racism.
Right.
And I'm like, that's wow, because it's something I can't really comprehend. So we now have your backstory. You've saved a lot of lives. You've given a lot of your life, really in service of your country and in service of other people. And this is still alive to this day. Yeah. You experience these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that comment, on one hand, I can understand why people would think that something like that is like, no, that can't be true. And I think that comes from a genuine place.
Yep.
I think it comes from, and I say this with respect. A lot of time ignorance is thrown around as a bad thing or as a bad word, but just literally a state of just not knowing.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to comprehend something from somebody else's experience if it hasn't been your experience.
Yes.
So, but I believe that to be a statement, whether very subtle or very overtly. I believe that to be true. I've experienced it myself. I think it was about maybe 10, 11 years old. It's the first time I experienced racism. A friend of mine's mom dropped me off to take a bus. I normally took public transportation to and from school in New York, which is not an uncommon thing.
Right, yeah.
So was dropped off to the bus stop. And when I was dropped off to the bus stop, I had 3 guys coming toward me, and one kind of bumped his shoulder into me. And even as a kid, I was a bigger kid, so I looked like I was considerably older. So he turned around and looked at me, and I turned around and looked at him. So I was a little feisty kid, though.
Yes, yeah.
So, he's like, "You ain't gonna say sorry?" I'm like, "You ain't gonna say sorry?" So they come back to me, and they got one on each side of me, and they're surrounding me. And so it's like, "You just hit me," and he said, "Just hit me and use the N word." And I was like, "You just hit me," and I use the N word back. So I'm like, "Okay, we can go back and forth with this." not realizing what my experience was. Because even growing up where I grew up, so I spent a lot of time, grew up in the Bronx in New York, which is a fairly minority community, sprinkled in with several different cultures, from Vietnamese to Hispanic to white to Jamaican, wherever it's the United Nations, as we used to call it, New York City.
Yeah.
So, my parents never taught me the depth of racism, about race and you're separate from this group. So I was aware of racism. Like, we would watch shows, and in the shows, it would be history about things that would happen. But in terms of that would be my experience, I'm like, okay, this is new to me. So I ate an elbow from somebody. The guy who was behind me hit me in the back of my head with his elbow. And I think at that point, one of them went to the same school that I did, and he recognized me. And I think that's probably what stopped him from doing something more. But that was my first experience with dealing with racism.
Yeah.
And they just kept repeating, and if you ever come back this way again, we're going to kill you. And, that just went on for a few minutes, and, got up, dusted myself off, and, mouth was bleeding a little bit, and wiped the blood, and got on the bus and went home. I didn't say anything to anyone because, what happened? Oh, got into a little fight. Okay.
Right.
Keep it moving.
Yeah.
So, that was my very first experience with racism. This is like a weird experience right now, but there is a weird little creature that I want to kill. It's a little bug in here, man. It's bugging me.
A little bug in there is bugging you.
Yeah. This is live. This is what live is about. I'm not going to sit here and act like everything is cool while this bug is bugging me. So,
yeah.
I'll keep it real.
Yeah. So, that was the first experience. You now had one not very long ago, a little more recently, 30 years later.
Yeah. I mean, and this experience it didn't, can't say I'm surprised. It was more of an annoyance because there was no reason for it. There's nothing behind it. So I'm driving into a gas station, and there's a guy in a pickup truck coming behind me. So I tend to drive out and back up because I'm always thinking, okay, if I need to get out, I need to get out quick. I don't have time to back up to get out. So I always back into my spots. So this guy, apparently I'm going too slow for him. So he speeds around me and almost runs into the front of my car. And he drives in forward. So me being the guy I am, I'm like, oh, apologies. And he's giving me the finger and painting the town with all the colorful words that he's throwing at me. So I'm like, what's all that for? So he's just there, boom, boom, going. And now I'm just like, I'm starting to get annoyed. So I'm like, okay, you were in a wrong. But I'm thinking, okay, maybe I could have done something a little better. I apologize because avoid conflict. For what? What's the purpose of it? So now I go into the store, he's talking, and then I think he realizes I'm actually about to get out my car now, and I stood up, and he looks, and he just kind of goes into the store. So now I'm just aware, like, where is this guy at? So I'm looking. So I go get what I'm getting. I get in line, and I noticed there was a big shelf with, like, candy and chips and stuff on there, and he was literally ducking behind the shelf. And then he ran out a corner door that I didn't even know was open. He ran out of there, and I'm like, what was all of that for? So now I paid for my stuff, so I'm just kind of walking kind of fast, just like I want to know, like, what's going on? What was all that about? But he jumps in his truck and he drives off to the edge of the exit of the gas station, which is a small lane on one end. And a lady, as she's passing me, she said, I think that man just spit on your car. So now I'm just like, okay. So now my heat level is all the way up here. And I'm looking around, I look on the rear door handle, and he spit on my rear door handle. So now he went to the exit of where the gas station is, and he jumped out of his truck and he pulled out his phone. and he's saying something, and he's as if he's trying to bait me into something. So I notice you're standing all the way over there, and I'm over here. So if you want to talk to me, come over here and talk to me. And he's just saying something. But by that time, there's another guy who's behind him trying to get out of the gas station. So that guy jumps out of his car, ends up chasing him out. So he ended up getting chased out by somebody else. But
so he had his phone up, and he's literally trying to goad you into a comment.
Yeah,
so he can film you.
Yeah,
and he's basically trying to shape a story or shape a narrative. You know, he's trying to goad you into a fight so he can say like, "Look, this guy attacked me." Blah 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 blah. You know.
So without knowing the backstory, you'd assume that all of a sudden, hey, this guy is just out here. Now, had I been the type to want to go chase him down and he's recording it, now you have the picture of somebody who's out of control or violent or angry, or try to paint the picture of, here, look at this guy, he's racist, he's chasing me. When, obviously you're not going to record yourself spitting on my car. Obviously you're not going to record yourself giving me the finger. You're not going to record yourself cursing me out. And I'm like, okay, where's all this coming from? So, I mean, at that point, it really just, several things happen in that space. So one, now I'm thinking, okay, I have to be aware, because I just instantly, automatically, my mind goes to glance at the license plate, got the state of the license plate, got the first few digits of the plate number. So now I'm thinking, okay, if I'm driving around, what is this guy capable or likely to do?
Right. Yeah.
So now I'm thinking, okay, that's one particular issue. So now everywhere I go, I'm driving around, and I'm still like, this happened maybe like a month, maybe a little over a month ago, but I'm still like, okay, everywhere I drive around, I'm looking.
Do you got to keep an eye out for this guy? Did he copy it on your license plate? Is he looking for you?
Right. And, I glanced at him. I noticed he glanced at the license plate, but he didn't look at it long enough for him to remember it, unless he just has a good memory. But I tend to pay attention to those things.
From your description, like you're a thinker, you're an intellectual, and you pick up on these details. He doesn't sound so intellectual.
To say the least, man.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. We just got a comment here from Gloria Miller here. It says, race hustling is lucrative. That's interesting. Because, well, what is race hustling? That's a term I've never heard before.
So true. I mean, think about a hustler.
I guess so. I guess that's what he was doing essentially. Is he trying to bait you so he can create a story, and he can get all this attention? Look, this fits the narrative that I want people to know, or something like that. Right. But he's the one that's doing the hustle.
Right. But then you catch the moment when you're getting the reaction.
Yeah. Okay.
So now when you're getting the reaction, you're like, okay, look what I found. Look what's happening. See, these people, those people, look at them.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, not painting the whole picture.
Yeah, man, that's, but somehow you kind of just kept your cool about this whole thing, even though you're quite physically capable, and, I
was ready to run him down, man. I'm gonna keep it real. I was ready to run him down. Especially when he spit on the door, man, because I'm thinking, I'm like, suppose, I mean, that's one of the lowest things you can do to somebody,
Very, deliberately demeaning.
Yeah.
Like,
so.
But that's exactly what he wanted, right? He wanted that response out of you, and a part of you wanted to respond.
Well, he wanted that reaction based on his action.
Yeah.
I gave him the response, and the response being different from the reaction. The reaction is to me is the uncontrolled,
right? Okay,
portion of what I could have done. The response is my controlled, my controlled action, my controlled reaction to his action.
Yeah. Okay.
So, it was hard, man. It was hard because I wanted to catch him.
Yeah. Yeah. But, and the irony of this is you're one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Like, you got one of the best hearts. Like, clearly you have a heart for people. In fact, like my nickname for you is the Heart Medic. And I think because you were a medic, and if I understand right, you left the paramedic or the EMT trade to get into fitness because you got tired of trying to save lives in the back of an ambulance, and you wanted to make an impact at an earlier stage before they ended up in the back of an ambulance.
Right. So that's the goal. I mean, I have to say, I love the experience.
The adrenaline.
Yeah. I mean, that's me all the way. The experience of being able to be in an environment like that, I've had conversations that I guess would not have been considered conversations you're supposed to have with people that really got them to open up and look at things, or at a minimum, provoke thought. And that's a mission for me to, at a minimum, be able to provoke thought in somebody. So if I can just have you, I never thought about it like that. And if that's the seed that's planted and somebody else waters that seed or whatever, it's there. But all of that is done with a limitation. So whether you're EMT, paramedic, a nurse, a doctor, there's a wall that you're not allowed to cross. And many do cross it, but they cross that wall, and they cross that line because they know something that can be better than medication, that can be better than the traditional forms of treatment that's given by a hospital. So them knowing that, a lot of times behind the closed door, they'll drop, look, this is off the record, but here's this. Or something as simple as, hey, look, you're consuming too much of this. Try changing this, do it a little bit slower, stop the salt, whatever it is. It can be something small. But because of the restrictions that exist around the medical field, it violates big pharma, so to speak, because that ultimately is behind a lot of the decisions that doctors make and their prescriptions and their diagnoses. So,
especially in the U.S., like the U.S. medical
my goodness
complex is a little different than, yeah.
So that became like a driving force for me. So a lot of times I was picking up people repeatedly, diabetic emergencies, people who had medical conditions that ultimately became heart attacks, or ultimately became strokes, or ultimately became the unfortunate cardiac arrest. So at working on the ambulance, we pretty much operate as everything. So from as basic to CPR to, it's usually a team of 4, because when there's a serious call, they usually call an additional unit. So a team of 4 is doing what doctors, nurses, and medical staff would do in a trauma room. In an uncontrolled environment, because you don't know what's around you. You don't know the potential dangers that are there. So
you're going to save a life, and you could be I don't know New York very well. I've been to Manhattan, and that's about it. But you could be in a pretty shady neighborhood trying to save a life.
Which happened with a gunshot victim we had, where my partner, big 6'4" white guy, and these black guys, a conversion on him. Yo, you better do something. He's doing what he can do at the moment, because we literally just pulled up to the scene, and he reminds me of this every day. I think it was instinct, because I didn't really remember it. But the long board that we put the patients on, when you see them on a stiff board, I flung one across the street. And when it hit the ground, everybody jumped back. And I forgot what I yelled, but I yelled something across the street. He was like, "Oh man, you just saved my life." And I didn't think, he told me this after the call, when we're just kind of going over everything. I didn't realize, but it was a pretty long throw. The energy, I saw what was happening. I saw what he was doing. I'm trying to grab equipment out of the truck so we can get to treat the patient. So my first instinct was just to fling that longboard across the street. And I remember saying something to them, and they were like, all right. But it just goes to show that it's there. It exists.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of interesting, because it's kind of going in the other direction. In this case, did you ever have people refuse treatment because of be like, you ain't touching me or whatever?
I have. So I remember this lady. She said to me, she tried to be subtle. I give her a check mark, if nothing else. I give her a check mark for trying to be subtle. So she actually said, "Is there anybody else coming?" I said, "No, just us." Can you maybe call for somebody else? I'm like, well, they're going to do the same thing we're going to do. And at this point, I'm kind of getting the gist of it. So I'm just you want to dance, I'll dance with you. So I'm just kind of going along. She's like, well, where's your partner from? Puerto Rico. So I said it loud. And she said, oh, well, I don't need any help anymore. I'm glad you guys came, but thank you. So I said, are you refusing care? So yeah, I'm going to refuse care. So you're refusing care based on race or based on the fact that you don't need us? Well, I'm just going to say I'll refuse care and ask you to leave. So I said, so I couldn't give you my pen. So just, I'm clowning her a little bit. So I couldn't give you my pen to sign my paper, the pen that I just held in my hand to sign my paper saying you refuse. Well, no, I'll get my own pen. Thank you. So she gets the pen and she like holds it by the tip and barely signed. And then she drops the pen on the floor. And then we sit outside. So we go to the dispatcher. We tell the dispatcher what happened. Just basically she refused care. And we clear the job, puts us available. We drive about a block and we get the call again. And they call our unit and they say, well, the call just came. Are you sure she refused care? I'm like, I have a signature. So then I called the dispatcher and explained what I thought it was. So she sent a supervisor to come on the call with us. So coolest guy, man, coolest guy. So rest his soul, Lieutenant Nelson.
Yeah.
Coolest white guy, man. We love that guy. And I say that only to highlight the fact that this is what she wanted. So we asked him if he can go in first. We explained the details. So he's like, yeah. So let me go in and I'll talk to her. So he's talking to her. He's asking her. He gets a history, everything that's going on with her. And it's like, yeah, you definitely need some medics. So let me call my medics in. We're standing outside the door. So well, let me call my crew inside and they'll come and take care of you. They'll treat you. And she's like, oh, okay, thank you so much. So we walk back in and now her eyes are just like, so she's already admitted to her need. The lieutenant took her blood pressure and everything, which was elevated at the time, and whatever else she was saying was wrong with her. So she's already highlighted she has a knee. I keep banging on this table. She already highlighted she.
Yeah, you got some Italian in there or something.
It's there, man. I'm telling you.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, man. So that's happened on several occasions. That's just one of the most memorable ones because it was kind of comical. The fact that she refused, and then when we walked back in the door, her response was just like totally overwhelmed, and she didn't know what to say. She didn't want us to do anything. Normally, we would carry her down the stairs because of her condition. So normally it's like 3 or 4 floor walk up because most buildings sometimes won't have elevators. So we have a chair. We literally had to carry him down, and so she had to sign to refuse that. She didn't want us to carry her. She didn't want us to touch her. She'll get up into the ambulance by herself. She's a grown woman. She can handle it all. And when she got to the ER, she did ask the nurse who was doing triage at the station, are there any white doctors in here? Because that's all I want to treat me. So the nurse just kind of looked at her, looked at us. So,
and I just think like the ability of you to just kind of, I don't like almost like normalize it and just kind of shrug your shoulders and carry on. Like the fact that it's happened enough times, like you're telling one story, I know, and I know a bit more of your backstory than I'm letting on. The fact that you're just sharing one story here, like when this is like a daily occurrence, and it's something that never even crosses my mind, never occurs to me. It's never been my experience. Like anywhere I go, I've lived in, to be fair, I've lived in foreign countries where I'm definitely a visible minority. And I've had my own hard experiences, but anywhere in Canada, like it's never been an issue at all. The fact that somebody would refuse care from a qualified human being who, could potentially save their life, but say no because, what I wonder is like, where does that even come from?
Yeah.
Like, do you ever like feel a sense of compassion or like kind of like almost like feel sorry for them that like they're in this place mentally?
There were times I did. There were times where I'm like, and I'm just gonna call it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, man. It sounds like, well, if you die, you die. It's on you, because I'm here to help you. And if the color of my skin is going to stop the medication that will go into your body is going to assist you, that's on you. Because it gets frustrating.
Yeah, no kidding.
And again, I can be a little bit more calm about it here, but it gets to that point because, at what point do, as a society, we go beyond just, okay, look, wherever in the spaces that it exists, because, some people get, butt hurt and feel like, oh my God, it's not everybody. I'm not saying it's everybody, but it exists.
Yeah,
and it exists on a big scale, bigger than people like to let on, or even that they may even believe or know.
Yeah.
But it just gets to the point where you're walking around and you're like, okay, if you interact with somebody, what's your motive? What's your intention? When you see me, how do you see me? So when I
Right.
walk into certain environments, what is it? What do I have to be careful of? Like when I'm driving through the South in the United States, I have to be aware. I drive through gas stations and look inside the gas station and say, I don't feel safe here. And I keep going to the next one. Those experiences. So
yeah, just that thought, and so then here's a couple questions. One, if I was to go to, I don't know, like Harlem, I think I'm just picking a name because I'm like, I imagine it's a fairly black community there. And I was to walk down the street, I'd probably stick out like a sore thumb because I'm like whiter than white. But
not today, man.
Yeah.
Harlem has changed.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Harlem has changed. Even the history and the culture of Harlem, they removed a lot of that. But even back in the day, you could walk through Harlem and you probably would feel uncomfortable because you would obviously stick out.
Right.
But you can go into a Jamaican restaurant and you can order some oxtail peas and rice, and they'll look at you, man. They'll be like, "Oh, you want some oxtail peas and rice?
Yeah.
So bring some oxtail peas and rice for the snowflake over here, man." And they would embrace you because you came into their establishment. Right, and you're going outside of your culture. So that was one of the things I think. And again, I'm not going to say this is the norm everywhere.
Sure.
But for the most part, in a black community, if you went to New York, and especially if you were like, as they say, crossing culture to experience something different, a lot of times you would be embraced just because of your willingness to be different. And be that person who stuck out and go into an establishment where most people would be like, I'm not going there. Why? All those people are black.
Which is really interesting because in my experience traveling, it was very similar. Like I've lived in Mexico, I've lived in Italy, I've lived in Poland, I've lived in South Africa. And all the times where I tried to learn to speak another language or made an effort to be a part of whatever the local community is, I've been really like warmly received. And it's fascinating because I think it highlights there is, we share a common humanity. Right. And when I would show an appreciation for a different cultural food that someone had prepared for me, because I love food anyways, I'd be welcomed in. Like if there's something I learned from, I've been to 45 countries on 5 continents, and there's a common humanity that we all experience, that we all share, and we all struggle. And food is actually a great way to break down barriers. I have to say, but it's like all we have to do is realize that we're all struggling for the same thing. Care for ourselves, care for our family. Have a safe life, that kind of thing. Like you don't want to. It's not your goal to walk around scared all the time or looking over your shoulder or things like that. You have a family. You want to take care of your family. You want to take care of your kids. Like
just like the next person.
Yeah. And it's like when people meet you and converse with you, they're like, "Oh," maybe they're surprised because, like, look, you do look a little bit intimidating. You're
I get it's this thing here, man, and man, the lighting is. But this face, man,
you're like because you're intense, you're muscular, you're like you're in good condition, all that kind of thing, right? So, but my wife says to me, she comes all the time. She's like, "What are you frowning about?" I'm like, "I'm not. I'm thinking."
Like, look, I was born like this.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's I mean, I do. So one of the things, especially that I'm experiencing here, is that so I'm in North Carolina here in the United States, and this is South is historically, traditionally considered to be more racy. Right. It exists everywhere, but the South has a history.
Yes.
A lot of people know of. So, a lot of times what I do, because I do a lot of my workouts outside in the park, and a lot of people walk past me and they're kind of glancing and staring, and
could just be admiring
Whoa. And so since I use and I'm just using resistance bands, pretty much resistance bands and body weight. And when they walk by, bands. And they walk by and they're like, look, in their minds, I could tell, you can feel somebody when they're wanting to say something and they're not sure. So I usually say, this is my gym membership without a membership.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, that's great. And once you just do something to break the ice, people tend to open.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a little irony in the midst of the conversation is that I have more white people engage in conversation with me when I just drop something than I do black people. There was one day, I think it was Labor Day, I was outside training, and I think there were like 8 white people that came up and actually engaged in conversation with me. Out of the 8, 4 asked me if I did any type of coaching or training.
Nice. That's great marketing right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I'll engage with everybody. Whoever walks by, good morning. Some people just wave, and I get it. Sometimes you're just on your walk and they just want to walk, fine. But I have more black people who don't respond to me than I have white people who won't respond to me. And sometimes I'm looking, so like it's something in the ear. I pay attention to those things, and sometimes people have music in.
Sure.
So I'm conscious of those things, and the ones who don't respond don't have any music in. So I mean, I think the irony is that there's sometimes an inherent belief or fear even amongst us that if we're too nice to each other, there's something we're after, or we're looking for something, or there's a scam, or there's a con, or there's something. Man, so
that's interesting.
That's the irony. And I think the bigger picture to what the wave or the rock that created the wave of racism or racist beliefs or biases has created. So that rock created a ripple effect that even exists amongst us sometimes, to where we would question us. And I'd be honest, I say in some cases, rightfully so. Yeah. Because, there are the situations where
say skin color doesn't exempt us from human nature.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the irony, man, that it's so many levels of it.
Yeah. So then going forward, what do you see happening in the future? Do you think things are becoming better or getting worse? And do you have any ideas on what people could do to make things better?
I certainly don't think they're becoming better, unfortunately. No, I can't say that. I can't say that unequivocally. I think to a degree, we're becoming better because as a new generation comes up, the newer generation doesn't come with these inherent biases. And a lot of times they're willing to break ranks with their parents. Right, they're willing to do the different and be different because they don't understand. They don't understand like what's wrong with the color of your skin, or why don't you like him because of that. So in that sense, we're getting better. In the sense of the current guard and the older guard that exists, I feel like it's not going to change. I feel like that there is still this this deeply rooted and deeply seated I'll just call it seed that has been planted for years and is still dominant in those who are in the greatest leadership positions in our country. I always think about the state representative in Georgia who was arrested for knocking on the governor's door, who, she had a right to be in the room as a state representative as he signed a bill, and I'm not speaking to agreeing or disagreeing with the bill, but just for the fact that as a position as a state senator, and a Black woman who's knocking on the door, she was arrested. And you're arrested for knocking on a locked door that you have the right to be behind, while the governor signs this bill under a picture of a plantation surrounded by white men. So I'm like, that picture right there to me still speaks of what exists. Beyond Black people, I think even women are still, because we're still hearing things like the first Black or the first woman too, or the first Black woman too. We're still hearing those things. And it's still a fight. So better in the sense that the fight is being won on certain fronts, but to be the person who has to go before everybody else and break the ground for people to come behind, we're still in a place where it's like, man, why are we still fighting these battles?
Yeah, it's got to be tiring at some point. You go, why?
Yeah.
So maybe I could ask a little bit of a loaded question. I'm not sure how I want to frame this question. Like the rioting and the looting and things like that. When sort of, could we say, like the behavior becomes destructive,
right,
damaging, that kind of thing, does there come a point where it's like you're doing more harm than good trying to protest or trying to fight for your cause?
Double-edged sword. So the stem, where does it stem from? So a lot of people are like, well, these people, they destroy. Like, yeah, okay. It is true. So causing damage to your own environment, causing damage, period, but causing damage to where you have to live, causing damage to where you have to eat, where your family walks, where your children play, counterproductive. The irony is that a lot of times the damage that's being caused is more to the establishment without really thought to the community. So, for example, a Target that gets destroyed. Well, who owns Target? What do they represent, and how is Target helping my community?
Right.
So Target may have come in and wiped out maybe 3 or 4 small businesses, so that the conglomerate can come in there and put up their business, and of course make somebody else a lot of money.
Right.
But on the other end, that's me being a thinker. I don't think that the community is thinking that deeply.
Right.
Some people are, but I think that it really just gets to a point where, just as you said, in your experiences, you go to other places, you go to other countries, and you experience different cultures, and you're embraced. Things are said like, well, Mexicans are animals, Black people are animals, these people are this, these people have no control, they don't know how to do this. Things like that tend to be said when you see a riot happen, or a protest happen, and you see the anger, the culmination of years of like, look, you can come into our community, we'll embrace you. We don't have an issue with you. As far back as Oklahoma in 1921 and the riots there. So you had a community that wasn't accepted, who decided to build their own community to create what they wanted, and their community was burned, destroyed, and bombed to the ground.
Was that the Black Wall Street?
Yeah. In Greenwood, Oklahoma, considered the Tulsa riots.
Yeah.
So that came off of the premise of the allegation that Black male, forgot his first name, but last name was Rollins. Wherever he was, they weren't allowed to use the restroom, so they had to go into a building. They had to go up to the top of the building to the colored restroom, and he had to take an elevator. He was in the elevator with this white woman, and the white woman said that he tried to rape her. And again, not speaking to the for or against, but the allegation was made. So he was held in a court. So you had Black people from the community went to the court to represent somebody from their community.
Yep.
Likewise, you had white people from the community going to support this white woman who said, yep, he tried to rape me. So whether that was the case or wasn't the case, it was deemed important for a community to say, this is why these Black people shouldn't exist and have what they have, because look what they try to do.
Right.
So maybe he did try to rape her, maybe he didn't try to rape her. Maybe he did not try to rape her. But that turned into a bunch of people going into a community saying, you don't deserve to be here, you don't deserve to have this, we're going to burn everything down, and led to hundreds of people being killed and a community being destroyed because of a situation. So, and without going into the history of, the Black male who was in a position or in a place, and a white woman who said, well, he tried to rape me.
Right.
And it turned into whether the allegation was true or not. This is also a history of things that have happened. So to take that back around to answer your question, I think the protests that in a lot of cases become riots are the culmination of frustration, are the culmination of what do we have to do to be heard?
Right.
Because we keep getting shot, we keep getting killed, and then we see other
Right.
instances because there are videos, there are everything else that record these other instances where people who are doing more of other races are getting less of a response. There was even a recent case, I forgot the city, where the police, it was in Maine, I believe, the police refused to arrest a white male because he was too dangerous. And the police chief got on the news station and is documented in their report, which I believe at this point is public record. He documented that his police officers, for a man who had a rap sheet as long as his height, and had several outstanding warrants against him, the two officers that approached him refused to arrest him based on the fact that they felt that he was too dangerous to arrest. So he never got out of his car and they let him drive away.
Wow.
So there were situations where people have been pulled over. Black people have been pulled over. Your tail light is broken. Get out of your car. We need this. We need this. And in some cases,
just harassing them and trying to provoke them, actually,
right.
Try and provoke a response.
Right. And in some cases, they've end up dead.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm not trying to create an environment of tension and
trying
to make it thick, but just to highlight certain things that happen.
These things do happen.
Right. And of course, as a community, we're going to see these things more. If you're not in a community, you may not know to pay attention to those things. If we're in a community, we'll hear, oh my God, another one.
Right.
And then when you get the history behind it, it's nothing. It's like the young man who got pulled over in Georgia, and somebody happened to pull over, and a white woman happened to pull over and pulled out her phone and started recording from a distance. The male got out of the car with his hands up, and the state trooper elbowed him, pretty much MMA type elbowed him in his face twice and threw him to the ground. And then he got on scene and they had a body camera image, and then he was already cuffed. Another officer came out, pulled him out of the patrol vehicle and slammed him on the floor and said he was resisting arrest. So you're detained, you're cuffed, you're in back of a vehicle, then you get pulled out of a vehicle by another officer who slams you on the ground while you're cuffed and tells you that you're resisting arrest. And then after the review of all of the charges, no crime was committed. No charges pressed against him. And even the state of Georgia and the police chief for that station or that department concurred with the actions, concurred that the actions that were committed against this young man were unwarranted. And the two officers were fired on the spot, which is rare.
That's because you've worn multiple uniforms,
right?
And in the same way that we say, like, you can't take the actions of, say, one black male and paint the entire black community with that. Right. Could we say you can't take the actions of a few bad apples in uniform and paint the entirety of those who wear uniform with that same sort of stereotype? But I realize that's a bit of a loaded thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, it is, because I agree that it's loaded, but I also agree with your statement, because sometimes it's the uniform itself and the idea that you're in a uniform of power, so you exert power. Right. You can be black, you can be white, you can be Hispanic. You just feel you're empowered now. So in a lot of cases, it's the uniform itself.
That's interesting.
It's the office that's held as an officer that sometimes empowers people.
And kind of where I was going with this is because you've been in uniform, you've had plenty of interactions with a lot of other people in uniform. Right. And you've probably observed, like, both good, bad, and ugly, I would think.
I kicked a cop out of my ambulance, literally kicked him out of an ambulance. And he fell on the ground, like literally kicked him out. Oh, man, his lieutenant ended up coming out. So there was a fight. Yeah. And his lieutenant sided with me.
Yeah.
which, you know,
You were like,
basically,
oh, man.
long story short, there was a gentleman who had an injury. He had a head injury, and he had a blown pupil, which indicates you have a brain injury. The officer was complaining that he had to go to the hospital with the patient, and he was mad, and he was like, well, this piece of trash needs to die anyway, and all this stuff or whatever, or who cares?
Wow.
At that point, I kicked him out of the ambulance, and he fell, and he got ready to jump up, and his lieutenant happened to be walking out, and he saw what happened, and he came up to me, and he came up to him, and he was heated because he saw his officer flying out. So I understand you're mad.
Yeah.
So I'm explaining what happened. I'm explaining what was said. I'm explaining what we need. And it was the lieutenant's order that somebody needs to go. Grab an officer. He told one of the other officers, grab an officer, send him with them. They got to go because this guy is critical. So sitting here with a guy who's critical, who needs to be transported with an officer, and he has an attitude, and now he's saying he should die, and he does all this stuff he was saying.
Yeah.
And the lieutenant pulled him aside. I think he ended up getting disciplined for what he said. Sent another officer with me, and he just looked at me. He's like, "Look, you got no problems. Don't worry about backlash coming from us." And just said, "Go ahead." Got another officer. We were gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I seen it, and a lot of times there's the impression by certain officers that because I'm in a uniform, when I see them do something, I'm going to co-sign what they're doing because I wear the uniform.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to necessarily break rank or.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
because I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think if we could just call out bad behavior as bad behavior, individual bad behavior, and I think this is something that kind of maybe frustrates me a little bit, is where, let's say someone falls into line with a particular political stripe, and a politician that's of the same, let's just say. In our country, we've got like liberals and conservatives. So let's just say somebody's conservative, and the conservative politician does something crooked, and the conservative is afraid to call out that politician because they're worried it's going to harm their cause. And it's like, one of my solutions is if we can call out bad behavior as bad behavior, and because hypocrisy doesn't help anybody. And it's like, you don't harm your cause by calling out bad behavior in your cause. I think you harm it by hypocrisy, by not calling it out and turning a blind eye to it. What are your thoughts on that? Should we try and focus on individual human behavior rather than broad spectrum judgments about population?
We should, but I think that really calls on each individual to hold themselves accountable, be responsible.
Personal responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, what a word. I mean, can you imagine if we had that? I think because it's so much about agendas. It's so much about what can I get out of it? What am I getting out of it? And what would I lose if I expose it?
Right. It's not hurting me.
Right. So I think the ability to stand up for truth is something that's become difficult now, because we live in an environment where oh my God, it's so many different levels of this, man.
The post-truth era.
Yeah.
The era where the truth is relative, my truth versus your truth, and things like that.
Right. So
it's a confusing time.
Yeah. And it creates a numbness. It creates an inability to hear. The volume is turned down on the ability to listen. So I can say all of the things I've said, and somebody else on far right, far left, far corner of the earth, or whatever they want to call themselves nowadays, if they believe different, the inability to hear me is overshadowed by their beliefs. So I believe this. I hear what you're saying, but you're a liar because that's what the far left says, or that's what the far right says. And if you're that or you're that, then it can't be true. You can't experience racism. You can't have that. That can't have happened to you. No,
because I'm a nice guy and I'm not a quote unquote, I'm not a racist or whatever.
Yeah. Like, I'm not a racist. Hey, N-word, get out of here. I'm not a racist. I'm like, we're like, what?
Have you? It's funny. I'm like, have you met like or interacted with like a genuine white supremacist? Like, because to me they seem like this weird breed of human being. I'm like, apparently they actually exist, but I've never met a real one, if I could put it that way. Like, they're like a circus tale that you hear about, but I guess it's real.
Yeah. So it's the weird thing about it is, man, is that there's an ability, I guess I'll call it an ability, but there's an ability to put on the mask and function in society while you go behind a closed door and you plan to kill a person of another race. So it's like the extremes are now in suits, they're now in uniforms, they look like everybody, they dress like everybody.
Right.
And they'll even have a brief conversation with you. Meanwhile, the agenda in the back of their mind is, if I ever catch you alone, I'd kill you.
Interesting. Okay.
So
that's a pretty obviously, like, that's a pretty I don't know if that's inflammatory is the right word, but like that's some pretty strong rhetoric. So then is systemic racism, which is a slightly different topic, I guess, than white supremacy, but like it's still alive and well and still kind of encapsulated in society at a lot of levels, but it's behind closed doors, and it's behind people. Like, they've exchanged like an actual physical mask for the mask of normalcy or decency or something like that.
Yeah, because it's like, you know what? So we go into the huddle. The huddle's behind closed doors, and how are we going to run this out to play? We want smart, because if we go out in public, there's all the scrutiny. So now let's go behind closed doors. Let's figure this out, and let's go out and look at it subtly. So now the subtle reaction may be, okay, like one cop said, and I'm gonna quote his words exactly. Let's go out and kill a nigger today. This was in 2020.
Wow.
So unbeknownst to him, he was recording himself.
Oh.
So,
wow.
Yeah, it's like, him and his partner said, let's go out and kill a nigger today. Ha ha ha. Yeah, maybe we can get two. That was the conversation.
Wow.
And
that's pretty brutal.
And
that was very brutal.
Calls them, like, be advised, the unit is keying up, not knowing that they had their microphone pressed, their receiver pressed. So that's the scary thing, because now, you can walk out and somebody is willing to play the part of a peaceful person,
right,
in order to play the long game. And the long game is, how can I hurt you? How can I keep you from advancing?
Right. Okay.
And it's there. It exists.
Because I would think, like, a lot of the ones that are maybe overt or very open about it are kind of like, even in those circles, seen as like buffoons, essentially, like useful idiots.
Yeah. Within their communities, though, it's there. So if you're surrounded by people who believe what you believe, then you feel like you're emboldened to do more, to be more, to act more.
Fair enough. Okay.
If you're in an environment similar to the guy who spit on my car, you were bold enough to do that by yourself. What would you do if you're empowered by other people?
Okay. Yeah.
If you had a partner with you, if you had a few people with you, if I walk into a group of you who thought like you, who felt like you, who felt, okay, this guy spit on his car, maybe we can bust a window and maybe we can attack him. If there were more people like you, then, what potentially would have happened? So, I mean, it's out there. I've never come directly in contact with somebody who presents themselves as an extreme,
right.
But I have interacted with people who I later found out was like, whoa, really? It's like, yeah, you didn't hear he got arrested? Like, no, I didn't hear anything. Yeah,
there's a book that I heard talked about recently, but it was by this Hungarian Jew, and I think he wrote, I wish I could think of the name of the book, but it talks about in 1944, I think it was the Germans came into Hungary. And I might not have all of my facts correct, but I think it goes something like this. And the Germans came in and they're like, they didn't come in guns blazing.
Right.
They kind of rolled in peacefully, and actually, even though they sort of had their authority and whatnot, they kind of started integrating into the community peacefully to begin with, under the radar, and people just kind of like turned a blind eye. See, they're not so bad.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long that went on for, but obviously it changed. They thought the war is almost over. The Russians are advancing on the Germans and so on, and like this, this isn't going to last and so on. I think they still managed to get trainloads of them back to the concentration camps. But the point of sharing this is, and I wish, and if somebody listening like knows the book I'm trying to describe, something, I'm sure there's night in the title. Anyway, point being, you talk about playing the long game, and so this is still very much alive and well, but it's under the surface. It's in ways that, it's presented innocuously, but behind closed doors is still very much happening. There's still very much an agenda, which is really kind of interesting to think about. So, well, man, this has been quite a conversation. Every time we talk, I learn more. I know this is the first one we've publicly recorded. But we've had quite a few of these conversations, and they're always eye-opening. And we're probably gonna have to do more of this. Ask more inflammatory questions. Ask more loaded questions, the ones that people are uncomfortable or afraid to ask. Because you're such a cerebral individual. You think very clearly. Obviously, like some of these incidents that have happened to you, like they make you mad because you're a human being, and no human being enjoys being disrespected. But you're able to thoughtfully answer some loaded and inflammatory questions, and we're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially this platform, I think we're kind of like the epitome of the balance of this. Me barely being able to be seen because the light is so dim.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
We are the piano, man. I'm telling you, man. We are ebony and ivory living together in perfect harmony. Side by side on the piano. If you're old enough, you know what I'm talking about.
A safe space for dangerous conversations where we can ask hard questions. And, the questions can come back this way as well. Next time we have one of these public conversations, I think it'll be really interesting. Yeah. And because for those who don't know me, I'm just I'm from small town Canada. Like, that's not to say Canada doesn't have its problems, but hearing stories like this, like it's never even occurred to me. I'm like, this has not been my life or my existence. So I'm learning about a perspective that I would have never thought about, except that Lamarr here's been willing to share his stories and his perspective. And I go, oh my gosh, that's what it's actually like. And when I hear stuff like this, it, like I feel something because I'm an empath. And so, like I already consider you a very close friend. And the thought of like somebody doing something to you, like hurts me. And I'm like, why would somebody ever do it to like one of the finest men I know? Why would anybody ever do that? But they just make a judgment based on what they see, because they don't know who you are and how remarkable you are. So
a lot of times they don't know who they are.
Yeah, man.
I think that's the deeper part. They don't know who they are, and they've surrounded themselves in a cocoon of a belief system that only serves where they are in their own space.
Yeah.
So I mean, you don't know who you.
that's a deep can of worms.
Yeah, man.
So
if you don't know who you are in this space, I can't expect you to see the value in me, because you don't even see the value in yourself.
Yeah,
you were pretty much or given an orthodox belief or a borrowed consciousness that was passed on to you, and you just said, "Hey, this is what I am."
And I'm like, as we're winding down, like, oh my gosh, you just said something really powerful, though. I want to unpack that more. But the idea, if you don't see value in yourself, because when we love and value and respect ourselves, we don't see others necessarily as a threat to our existence. We're much more open to what we might to others with different experiences.
Yeah.
So we're gonna dive more into mental obesity next time we do one of these chats.
Yeah,
and talk
definitely.
what that looks like. So for those who've tuned in, I know we've had at least one viewer for the whole time.
Thank you, Gloria. You're the best.
Yeah, we've had at least one viewer. We've had as many as 5 or 6 simultaneously. So I don't know if it's one person stuck around for the whole time, or if it's just people hopping in and out and someone sticks around. But
Yeah.
it's definitely been interesting. I think we'll try and upload this into. This is like the first part of like a mini series of what I want to call a safe space or dangerous conversations, where we can ask hard and uncomfortable questions and bring people on who've had uncomfortable experiences and talk about sort of the real humanity of it, because that's what we'd like to highlight. And so,
Right.
yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, and you'll catch us again soon.
All right, everybody. Thank you. We appreciate you, and have a phenomenal evening.